There's a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to hardware transcoding and Plex. Sometimes it is spread by people who make money on affiliate link sales who hype up expensive enterprise-grade server hardware they get referral money through selling, often downplaying efficient and more powerful options like GPUs. Some of it is due to people's personal bias, while some of it is likely due to the nature of the topic and how complicated it can be. This is the Quadro RTX 4000. At the time of making this video, it is Nvidia's cheapest Turing Quadro option. Today I will be comparing it to a P2000 and a P5000. We picked these cards because they each have a unique performance characteristic. The RTX 4000 is a newer architecture with an extra Decode chip. The P5000 has an extra Encode chip, and the P2000 sets the bar price to performance wise. It is a common misconception that more compute power in your GPU will result in better performance when it comes to hardware transcoding and Plex, and today I will show you that that is not always true. If you were to follow that logic, the RTX 4000 with its extra Decode chip, newer architecture, and double the passmark score should crush the P2000. The reason this is not always the case is because there are separate chips that offload encoding and decoding workloads, specifically when transcoding a video. These special ASICs don't change much, if at all, between the lower end and the higher end graphics cards of the same generation. That said, while they may not change the encode-decode hardware, Nvidia often adds more of them to some of the higher end cards, which can improve performance assuming you have enough VRAM to keep up. Looking at Nvidia's encode-decode support matrix, you can see the P2000 and P5000 have the same number of decode chips, but the P5000 has twice the number of NVENC or encode chips. While the RTX 4000 has the same number of encode chips, when compared to the P2000, it has one extra decode chip. The total amount of VRAM, the number of ASICs, and the specific generation of ASIC in a GPU will have the most impact when it comes to Plex hardware transcoding performance. A link to this list can be found below in the description for this video. We will be doing all tests in a system equipped with dual E5 2680 V2 CPUs, 256 GB of NVMe storage, and 256 GB of DDR3 ECC memory. So with that, let's start by comparing the P2000, P5000, and RTX 4000. These tests yield meaningful results because we can actually see the performance advantages the P5000 has with its 16 GB of VRAM as well as its extra encode chip, compared to the 5 GB of VRAM the P2000 has. Let's start by transcoding 1080p H.265 AC3 down to H.264 at 1080p AAC. The P2000 in our test bench averaged about 27 transcodes, while the P5000 averaged 36. This is about a 25% gain for the P5000 when compared to the P2000. While the RTX Quadro 4000 only saw 28 simultaneous transcodes. This wasn't too much of a surprise. While the RTX card has an extra decode chip, it is still handicapped by having half the VRAM of the P5000. The next test was transcoding 1080p H.265 AAC down to H.264 at 1080p. The P2000 and RTX 4000 both averaged about 29 transcodes each, while the P5000 averaged 42. That is another 25% advantage for the P5000, very similar to the performance differences we saw in the previous test. Transcoding 4K is something I generally don't recommend. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, and it's very difficult for current hardware to do, but for comparison's sake, I wanted to throw in a 4K test. In this test, we transcoded a 4K H.264 AC3 32 megabit per second file down to 1080p at 10 megabits per second. The P2000 averaged 11 transcodes, while we got 15 from the P5000, and the RTX averaged about 12 transcodes. These cards all performed very well, but the P5000 with its extra VRAM and encode chip beat out the competition by about 25%. All three of these cards performed very well, but ultimately the P5000 was the most powerful of the bunch when it came to hardware transcoding and Plex. Part of that has to do with its extra NVENC chip, and part of it has to do with having 16 GB of VRAM on board. Even a single 1080p transcode job can require hundreds of megabytes of a GPU's VRAM, while 4K transcoding requires significantly more. When picking a GPU for the sole purpose of transcoding video files, it doesn't always benefit you to pick something more expensive. For instance, the P4000 is almost identical to the P2000 as far as the number of encode and decode chips each card has, and would likely perform very similar in most cases. It would have a slight edge due to having 8GB of VRAM compared to the 5GB a P2000 has, but I don't think the performance difference you would see would justify the price difference. If you compare a GTX 1070 to a GTX 1080 for instance, they both have 8GB of VRAM and the same number of NVENC and NVDEC chips. Both cards are capable of about 34 H.265 transcodes, while the GTX 1080 is much more expensive due to having more compute power. But compute power is not what is used by Plex when transcoding video. These are just some of the things you should consider when purchasing a GPU as an upgrade for your server. Other factors to consider are the form factor of the GPU, if you have enough power for your PCIe bus, as well as your power supply. If you don't want to fuss around with hack drivers and operating system quirks, I still think the best bang for your buck is a P2000 for both its size, low power requirements, and overall time required to get it up and running. Something I haven't mentioned on this channel before but have been asked a lot is what operating system you should use with a P2000. At the time of making this video, Plex does not natively support hardware decoding in Linux with Nvidia GPUs. While it's true you can compile Plex with the correct FFmpeg libraries to make that work, it's a workaround that can introduce complexity and bugs to your server. I would personally stick with Windows 10 if you choose to run a P2000 today, as it's a hell of a lot easier to get up and running and to get the most out of your video card. If at a future date support for hardware decode changes in Linux, and from what I've read it might very soon, then Linux would be a solid choice. Thank you for watching. Sorry for the delay in putting out videos. We should be back on track to record on a more regular schedule from here on out, and thank you for sticking with us.